Hello, Karl, my disreputable friend. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's excellent to hear your voice.
Well, yeah, we know we spend more time sending each other irreverent messages via electronic communication, but very little time actually talking. Probably because there's an entire kingdom in between us, isn't there?
There is indeed, yeah.
We're not allowed to give away where you are, but it's not Wales.
Are we not?
Well, I don't, you can if you want. You can tell people.
Well, it's on my Substack. Have I mentioned my Substack?
Not yet. We are 30 seconds in, and you have not mentioned your Substack.
I'm in Norwich. Yeah.
And now, live from Norwich is Karl.
Hello. It's a wonderful night in Norwich.
As this is your first appearance on the show, can you tell the boys and girls at home who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name is Karl and I grow plants. Lots of them. I have done for quite a long time. I grow a great variety of plants. And as I'm doing so, I think about stuff.
I have this mental image of you sort of standing there with a fork, turning over the soil and muttering about something in the world around you.
Yeah, probably a podcast in my lug holes.
Mm. So where does this growing of plants occur?
Okay, have what used to pass for a full council allotment plot, which nowadays, through various initiatives, has ended up being two current conventional plots together, if you see what I mean. So, what used to be a normal plot before they were last divided, it was about 137 square meters.
Okay.
And I have a polytunnel on that plot, and it's divided into various beds. And at home, I have an 8x5 greenhouse and a few cold frames. And that's most of the major land and hardware, really, yeah.
So if I was a proper podcaster or a broadcaster or one of those professional types, at this point I would ask you to explain what an allotment is. But it's a kind of a municipally owned garden that you rent from the local authority.
That's one definition, and that covers the great majority of such plots in the UK. Yes,
Is it too underwhelming a description for your acreage?
it's become a generic term, but it's had specific meaning in law and history in the past. But if you ask any Brit about allotments, then they'll have an image in their mind of the kind of council plot that I work on. Yeah, but in the past, I've worked on private plots and cooperative communal plots, and they all come under the generic allotment, I suppose.
How long have you been doing that for then? How long have you been growing on bits of council land or other people's land?
I started growing on family land at my great grandfather's knee. I was lucky enough for him to be alive when I was quite young. He and I together, we used to grow onions, pickling onions, and at the end of the season, we used to sit and pickle them.
Hmm.
But he had lots of other different crops on the go, and then with my he was my paternal great grandfather, and then my maternal grandfather. He in the grounds. This sounds quite grand, and it is to an extent. But he bought a cheap, extensive property, and it had a Victorian walled garden in the back, and we resurrected it over a couple of summers, the whole family, and you could put You could put your whole arm down into the depths of this black soil that have been tended and loved for years and years and years. Get strawberries the size of apples off it. It was fantastic. And then there's a big break, really, for me. Kind of grew out of that, became a teenager, started doing teenage things, then got swept up in modern adult life, and I didn't come back to it until I was in my early 30s. And I was involved with a project that had a side project, which was an allotment. But the main project came to an end, and for one reason or another, I ended up with the allotment. And I've had one ever since. And that was 2007. So with 1 year off, I've been doing it non-stop since 2007.
So I think there is something that hits you in your early 30s that you just look at a piece of ground and go, I could do something with that.
Yeah.
I think if you are that kind of person that you hit a point where you want to manage land, you want to do something with it, and whether it's growing food or gardening of some type, or for some people it's cutting trees down, for some people it's planting trees, for some people it's both. There's something there. I think there's something like a latent Manchurian candidate switch that flicks when you smell soil.
Do you think that comes before any awareness or experience of a wider cycle of production? Do you think that's quite a base instinct kind of thing? Because you can get trapped and fall in love with things like that on the cycle side, on the bigger picture. But do you think there's a natural draw to it, an instinct that?
I think there is, and I think it gets masked and replaced by other things that look like it. So I think that's where the real desire to travel, and particularly to do stuff involving outdoor recreation, comes from. You get a lot of people who seem to discover the outdoors in the late 20s and early 30s. Yeah. I think same part of the brain kicking in, but because they haven't got access to land to grow food, to do things, it comes out instead in running around a muddy field or climbing mountains or mountain biking or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think there may be something in that.
So with your allotment now, what's to your flanks? What's happening around you with those other people? Because there's other people with their allotments putting up against yours, aren't there?
Okay, so this is going to be the subject of something that I want to write something silly and unreadable about in the future. So the realities of living on a local or authority provided allotment, because there are various wrong ways in which things are done.
Is that wrong by your eyes or wrong by the eyes of everyone else? No, that might be two different things.
No, I am not a collectivist,
right,
at all. But I'm talking about things which are for the greater good on the allotment. I believe in the greater good on the very small scale, like around my allotment, and that's a cultural thing that needs to improve, because it just creates a lot more work, and it creates a lot more people who start this cycle. Let me explain. So at this present moment in time, I'm flanked by two extremely neglected allotments. There's been a procession of people who turn up, and they're either full of enthusiasm at the beginning, and then suddenly you never see them again, or they come in with ideas like that they can perfectly grow a whole harvest of all the crops that they want and never weed a thing. They'll just coexist. And in the meantime, all of these weeds are spreading across all of the neighbours. When I said in terms of a better culture, there needs to be better support and information. Where that comes from is a matter of examination and decision down the line. But so they need to be supported. And the council do not help in this regard. For some reason, they always release allotments which have become available right at the end of the summer, in August. And the Anglo-Saxons used to call it Weed Month. It's the month of weeds. It's the month of grasses. So they come to an absolutely jam-packed plot, which is quite neglected. And they don't do anything with it at that point in time when they really, really should, because they need to get a head start for the next season. And this information isn't being conveyed to either the people taking up the plots or those administering their allotment.
Yeah, well, the council probably just either are incompetent or don't care. I think either flavour is available.
Well, if there's a transgression of the rules, they care.
That's different, though. Nobody. there's always enough energy to punish rule breakers, but there's never enough energy to encourage people.
My allotment plot is divided into 4 or 5 sections, each with a drive, depending, say 4 sections, each with a drive with its own gate. And our drive is an absolute case in point. Right at the top, there are impeccable allotments, and they are surrounded by well-kept allotments. Then further down, you've got a very untidy allotment, which is bordered by others, which are very, very good. And the weed problem up there is obvious. There's poor old me down at the bottom.
Is there any sort of potential etiquette issues that if you just go rogue and, say, jump a fence with a hoe and start attacking their weeds, or at least create a fire break between their weeds and you?
Or have a strimmer.
Yeah, so could you just come through in the middle of the night and remove their stuff? They'd know it was you, though, wouldn't they?
You've got me ranting now. I'm upset, but it's a serious point. It's a serious point, because as I said, it's a self-completing cycle, because it just more neglect begets more neglect, begets more hard work, and people give up because of the hard work, and then there's more neglect. And this is a relatively recent thing. The standards of keeping on these local authority allotments has historically, up until recent times, been very good.
Do you think it's a generational thing then? Is it these millennials, which I think I'm one of them technically?
Are you?
Well, I was born in 1983, so I'm just at the edge of X. I'm an exennial, maybe.
Exennial, yeah. Xennial, yeah.
But I'm also 40, so well, nearly 40. I keep being told I'm too old for the references I'm making in various clients that I'm working with at the moment. So, and everyone is younger than me. And then somebody who was in their early 50s turned to me and said, "People of our age." So I think I've slipped through the gap there somehow. But do you think it is then people coming into it and they don't know that there isn't the option to just have a montage appear of them working hard in the allotment, and then suddenly there's vegetables? It's going to be hard work, and then you won't see any benefit from it until next May. Do you think is that the issue?
Well, yes, they're not prepared. I don't think it's not a generational thing, because you don't really see young people that young coming in to do it. They all tend to be at least 35 and over who are taking up the plots.
Do you think there's like a certain cultural type as well that come to allotments? Do they all? Back in the day, I can imagine there were a lot of Volvos in the car park, but these days? Second-hand electric vehicles, maybe?
At least our plots and all the plots that I've been on really are really mixed, really mixed. And they all come from all different professions and walks of life. It's very, very diverse, as it were.
It's a full melting pot of people angrily shouting at worms.
Yeah, and there's a Russian contingent right in the middle who are busy building themselves saunas and all sorts. They're always getting in trouble, setting off rockets, building saunas.
Are they staying in their bit, or are they moving around a bit and taking over other bits that look like their bit but isn't theirs?
No.
Oh, okay. So I thought I'd check. It's worth checking.
They're keeping to themselves, remarkably.
For now. So it is, at the time of recording, it is very beginning of October.
Mm-hmm.
We've just come out of Weed Month.
Yeah.
More or less. What's happening down on the patch? What have you done recently? What are you in the full flow of?
I'm creating huge piles of vegetation, because during August I'm usually extremely aggressive about August. I don't allow much to interfere with it, because you have to be on it. You have to be weeding, you have to be watering, and if you keep on it in August, you're going to have a fantastic harvest. That's what the odds say. But for one reason or another, this August I wasn't able to put the time in. So at the moment, it's quite overgrown. And I'm creating huge piles of sunflower stalks and corn and tobacco. My tobacco crop is finished. Digging up potatoes. I packed down the polytunnel because this is the second year that I've had that, and it needs some refreshing over the winter. So I'm not going to have anything in that over the winter. Beating back next door's brambles. Also, I'm completely rethinking one side of it, because in order to combat this non-stop onslaught of weeds, one tactic that I'm going to try is completely clearing the plot, having a bare earth plot, which I've not actually done before. And I think there is benefit in that.
Is that sort of the opposite to no-dig gardening? Is that going to be the raised earth approach and just...
It's going to be more hoeing, really. For the roots that require it, like potatoes, I dig. To dig or no dig is Mr. Dowding, Charles Dowding.
Mm-hmm.
As he says, it's very situational, and I'm on a floodplain for a river, a flood basin, and I'm in East Anglia, so it's just pure sand.
How far down have you prepped for that patch then? So you mentioned earlier about being able to put an arm down into rich black soil.
Oh, two shovels down, you get pure golden sand. And that's the same from here to Cambridge, more or less. The soil is historically extremely fertile, but it's very thin.
Because you're basically on the seabed there, aren't you?
Yeah, it's all reclaimed by the Anglo-Saxons and the Dutch.
Here's the thing: you can blame the Dutch for many things, but they did give us quite a bit of England back and make it usable. Between Somerset and East Anglia,
they did wonders, and the Netherlands is a miracle.
Yeah, so just need to work on Doggerland next and get that bit in between sorted
that'd
back.
Be great.
Yeah, the reclamation for that. Have you ever seen any of the proposals for that, about basically taking everything out of the wash and dumping it on Dogger Bank and making Doggerland back into a platform and working your way backwards to the eastern coast of the UK?
No, I haven't. That's mad. That's a crazy, insane idea. But the wash could do with scooping out a bit, couldn't it?
Well, I think it was the opposite of the idea that the Nazis had. I mean, here we go. The Nazis had an idea to dam the Mediterranean between Gibraltar and North Africa and then drain the Mediterranean out and turn it into farmland.
As it once was, as is tradition.
As is tradition, which would have been interesting. I'm picking my words very carefully here about policies. I'm only interested in the engineering aspect of that. That's it. That's I'm just going to put a box around that. The Dogger Bank thing of reclaiming the lost land to the east of England, I'd be all for that. But I'd rather have that than a wind farm, to be honest. And the wind farm pretty much is there because it's on top of Dogger Bank.
Well, yeah, quite.
Yeah. Sorry, that's enough of a rant. So my producer is mouthing the words vegetables at me, which brings us back into the room. So you're basically closing the season now. You're harvesting those last valuable things, but then deciding what the hell you're going to be doing next year and making the preparations for that.
Yeah. I've last weekend I bought my autumn planting alliums, and they're going in this weekend. So I bought a whole bunch of onions and garlic and ramsons.
Yeah, you got some wild garlic in there, or rams. I hate the name wild garlic for it because it's the wrong name. Ramsons is a proper name for it, because wild garlic is just the modern invention,
a marketing label.
It is. It's just hippies with a bit of marketing now. So in the 1970s, started calling it wild garlic. That was it. That thing about putting alliums under the soil as well before the winter. Do you pay much attention to the depth you're putting them at? Because there is this whole thing about they might need a little bit of a tickle with frost, compared to they need to be far enough down to be completely insulated by from frost.
That I've tried both. I've not seen any difference, but that data is muddied by the fact that our plots are plagued by pigeons, and if you leave the little wispy, I'm sure there's a technical name for the wispy brown bit at the top of an onion set. If you leave that above the ground, they will pull it up and have it out and tip it over.
Really?
So, yeah, pigeons will do that.
I've seen it with crows and saplings, but not. I've never seen a pigeon fly off with an onion set. Huh.
They don't do anything with them. It's curiosity more than anything, I think.
Little gits.
Yeah, me and the pigeons. Yes, the pests. We could talk about pests as well.
Well, the best pests are the edible ones, I find. So allium's going in, but
yes.
Anything else going in over the winter?
No. I don't think there is. I haven't actually sat down and done the planning that. I don't know. I don't usually do it until November.
So we're about to lose a 3 meter by 10, 12 meter patch, which has been a good potato and allium patch for us. And it was one of the first ones I started doing here about 5 years ago, and really turning in. And it's decent soil now, but just because of the location, it's going to become the new chicken area. So we're going to put a big polytunnel frame over the whole lot of it, but rather than putting polytunnel plastic over it, we're going to put netting, because it has to be avian flu secure now, doesn't it?
Even down to your size.
Yep.
How many do you have?
We're up to 6 chickens at the moment, but we're going to be getting more. So that's kind of the idea we want to up. Well, the ones we have are all geriatric, basically. They don't really produce eggs, and they just consume feed.
But they love you.
Yeah, they do love us, apparently. But I'm not allowed to put them in stews.
One day.
Well, yeah, not yet. We're not allowed to eat anything that we've named. Apparently, that's the rule. When we talk about the pigs in a few episodes' time, we'll come back onto that. But the chicken run we're putting in is going to knock out a really good patch. So I'm now eyeing up other corners of the garden and the field to say, okay, well, am I just going to take that in then? And our soil is the opposite of yours. Our soil is, you just need to waft a bit of heat over it and you could turn it into flatware for a wedding service. There's so much clay and aggregate in it, it would make fantastic concrete. And it does every summer. But the only stuff that we've managed to make work has either had about 4 ton of horse manure thrown into it, or wood chip and organic matter of all sorts that's just been dug in again and again and again and again. And we're still only about a foot down, even in the good patches. We've started using potatoes as landscaping tools to try and break up the soil. But I am a little bit envious of you and your sandy soils.
Well, you do have to keep pouring organics into it as non-stop. I've got a big compost. So one benefit of being surrounded by so many weed factories is that I get to generate a lot of compost. Try to judge. I'll put away at least 4 or 5 cubic meters of green material, and then that'll over the course of a couple of years, as I transfer it through various bays, that obviously comes out as a lot less at the end, and I have to continually pour it back into the plot.
Do you have sort of the standard pallet-sized bays that everyone seems to end up with?
I do. I made precisely that, and then I coated it in photo-stable black plastic to attract as much heat as possible to try and accelerate the process.
See, we haven't done that. We did it with old corrugated metal sheeting that we had around, which has, and the reason because it was old and not being used was that it was rusty and full of holes, which means rats are now getting into the compost through those holes and dragging the freshly made compost out into the hedge.
Oh dear! Do you put food in
it? Some food waste, but it's a tiny percentage of what's in there. I think it's more to do with warmth and smells rather than scavenging food.
I've seen videos of your rats; they look very comfortable.
This is the problem because we have, for work of different types, I have thermal imaging gear and cameras and binoculars and stuff, which means I can have very asymmetric warfare with the rats. But it also means that there will be times I'll just be idly wandering around at night, using thermals to keep an eye on where the dogs are in the field, and then come around a corner and there's a rat sat there looking at me, just looking a bit disgruntled, like I've disturbed it. It's just asking me what my intentions are, I think, before it wanders off. It's basically got a waistcoat and a little walking stick. You know, it looks like something from Wind in the Willows.
You'll have a peak caps in a toll booth.
We've got like Peaky Blinder rats. So this is it's normally for us, it's the time of year where we think we should have been more productive. And we think, but next year is going to be different.
Yes, it is. Yeah, definitely.
I was wandering around a proper farmer's field earlier this week, looking at pumpkins. And it was interesting looking at what they'd done there, because they'd kind of put pumpkins in and then done nothing with it. And it had all been overtaken by redshank, and then bits of clover and all sorts of other things had grown up past it. So we thought there were no pumpkins left in the field, but now that's all dying back. There are some sizable pumpkins, and now the sun's getting to them. They are starting to go pumpkin coloured. But it was really interesting seeing where the big gaps were, where nothing at all had come up. And there was you suddenly find an area 10 meters by 10 meters with nothing in it, and then either side of it would be absolutely chocked with pumpkins. We're trying to work out what it was, because I'm fairly sure the seed drill had carried on going throughout it all. It wasn't lack of seed, it was some other factor in there.
Fertilizer, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. But I don't know whether it was just something because we had a particularly wet spring.
Yeah, I had trouble with squashes. You always get wins and losses, and I got quite a lot of wins. I got a lot of losses this year. Squashes were one of them. I couldn't nurse them through to any robustness for some reason. And beans as well. Every bean that I planted, for more or less, apart from one variety, they just wouldn't come up. It was the weirdest, darnest thing. It just wouldn't happen. And you get years like that sometimes.
Because I think we'll get a few people listening to this, a sizable amount of people listening to this, who they are interested in the other side of the food thing. They're interested in the hunting side or maybe the livestock side of it, but they've never really grown their own vegetables. And I think if you start with a few easy things like radishes or stuff like that, you get a false sense of how easy the rest of it's going to be. Because you prepare the soil and you put a seed in it and a thing comes up and then it's edible. You think, oh, well, you just get all the other species and you get those seeds and you put them in as well and then they'll come up. But no, well, they bollocks.
Everything needs its own little bespoke care package.
I remember somebody saying to me that he hates tomatoes. He lies awake at night thinking about the tomatoes in the greenhouse. They're just waiting for a way to screw him over in some really disappointing way. They'll just be nearly ready and then get a blight, or just be nearly ready and then suddenly start rotting on the vine, or be fine and then fall over for no reason and squash everything.
Corn, eaten by rats. What got a beautiful crop. Turn around, everyone is gnawed down to the stalk. We're moaning a lot about growing, but I love it. I do.
Well, it's because you think you can do it next. It's like you're in a relationship with an abusive partner. You think you can change them.
It's precisely that. I'll change, darling. I promise.
I love him. Yeah, it's or her, because there is something in that. Oh, well, I didn't do that last year. I didn't do that one thing, and if I do that this next year, then it will work.
Yeah, that's the optimistic stage after all the crying and gnashing.
Yeah. I think there's something in that hope. There is something in that it's going to be better next year. No matter what else is going on in your life, you can affect change on this small thing. But I think the fact of it being such a long road as well, that it's not instant gratification. It's the sort of slow dopamine cycle, isn't it? I think that helps. That certainly helps me, because it means that I can go off and do some good now, but no, I won't see the result of that good for a long time.
I've only cast my eye over it, but I was reading an article this afternoon. I'm going to finish it off tomorrow. What was the title? Technology doesn't make our lives easier, it makes them faster. I thought that there's some parallel or link to growing here, because you can throw an irrigation system at it or a polytunnel, but it's still very low tech. And I do a lot. I put in a lot of time to it, relatively. So it kind of dilutes the amount of technology in my life. I don't work in an office. I'm not strapped to a computer all the time. What I was thinking this afternoon off the back of this article is, I use a lot of tech, and I am tech savvy, but it's kind of diluted in my life by all my growing activity being out down on the plot getting mucky. And as a result, I think my life is slower because of the connection that I have with the seasons. Because I am, if I look back to the period where I wasn't growing and I was doing a lot more rat race stuff, the year would whip by and you'd think, Christ, it's Christmas again. How did that happen? And when I'm growing, I very rarely feel that it puts a steady sort of beat into your life across the year.
I would agree with that. I think there's something in just even observation of nature gives you that. When I've spoken to people about sort of mental health and connection to the outdoors and to green spaces, which is a term I absolutely hate. Because you can have a park and it's a green space, but it's a shit green space.
Yeah.
The mental health aspects of seasonality and that seasonal affective disorder and lack of, particularly in higher latitudes like where we are in the UK, that lack of sunlight in the middle of winter.
Yeah, not to be underestimated.
No, and there is at this time of year, it always feels like you're watching the slow death of the summer around you, and it's not coming back now for months and months and months. And all you're going to have is mud and long nights and rain, and there is a sadness in autumn and winter. But if you know where to look, you can find new shoots, young shoots coming up in the week between Christmas and New Year.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
And I think you have to be an interested observer of nature, but not necessarily a careful one in order to see that. But you just have to be able to look out for it. And I've done that with friends, and I've done that with clients, and I've done that with other people where we're talking about this in the middle of the winter, and it's like, no, look, come with me. We're going to go to the woods. Like, look at this green thing coming up through the ground there. That tiny little green shoot there in the first week of January. That's wild garlic, as you would call it, you Philistine. But that's Ramsons. That's wild garlic coming through that you can see that is going to be growing all the way now until the end of May. And it's coming up through now in what you would think as being the middle of winter. And I get the same kind of feeling from growing stuff, from putting those things out, because you think January seems like a hell of a long way from the middle of summer. But if you're getting into the cycle of growing things, if you haven't got your stuff done by January, you're behind, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you need. I need to have the greenhouse start filling up by the first couple of weeks in February, or I start getting really antsy. And if it's a cold spring and it goes through till March, I'm just hopping. I'm not selling this hobby, but it's something I can live with. It's an anxiety which is vital. As you said, it's linked to that instinct.
It is, and you say like hobby.
No, it's not.
It's more important than that, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a really, really bad shame on me.
Yeah, well, we'll kick you off the podcast in your first episode. But I think it is that there's growing flowers can be a hobby. Growing food is something more.
Yeah. It's. I'll straight up say that I think about it quite politically.
I think the allotment grower and the person, or even the person just growing basil, not basil, but basil, in a flower pot on their windowsill, has more in common with the farmer than the mountain biker or the dog walker walking across their land.
They're more connected to. They have a conscious connection to the essentials of life, isn't it? Really, surely.
Yeah, but also some of the impermanence of that. That this is a good year, and you couldn't do much about it.
Yeah. I'll get to that philosophical stage for 2023 soon, I hope. I'm finding lots of catharsis in slashing, and I'll start the burning soon.
Are you allowed to burn? Are you allowed to burn on the allotment there?
Yeah.
They don't come at you with leaflets about clean air.
Oh, the latest advice is: do you really have to? Could you not compost that? But it's it's around about 200 foot of rotten 3x4, mate. I can't do much else with it but burn it, so I'm going to burn it.
This used to be my kitchen.
There's all the raised beds on this side that I'm going to clear.
Oh, I see. It's the because we're quite lucky being out a little bit out in the sticks. We're at the edge of a village, but no one. The only people who could complain about it are the neighbours, and we one of the neighbours we actually get asked to go over and burn their stuff for them. We seem to be quite good at it. It's like so Fahrenheit 451. You call the fire brigade and they just come along and light a fire.
Yeah.
I've
got a lovely, great 200-litre metal incinerator. I'm looking forward to firing it up.
Is that a new one?
No, I've had it a couple of years. There's a garage down the road. This is a good tip. Good tip, by the way. There's a garage down the road, and they buy lube and nipple grease and whatever else that they do with with this stuff in 200-litre barrels, and I take one of them away and I burn off whatever nipple grease was in it.
Sorry, Constable. I am burning off nipple grease in my municipal allotment. Come at me, bro.
Grind a couple of holes in it, and off you go.
That's because I've not got on well with metal incinerators. The only ones they've worked well have been things that used to be something else. Anything that's one of those, it's like a dustbin but with holes drilled in it. They always rust out within a year.
This one's proving
it's probably thicker steel.
Quite, yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
So the burning stuff off is, I mean, that's a very autumnal scene anyway, isn't it? The slow rising smoke from a pile of burning vegetation and leaves set against the autumn hues of the hedgerow, the low mist in the valley, you wearing a comfortable woolen jumper. There's something in that, isn't there?
Yeah, yes, that's a bucolic scene. I hate it when the guy who has the plot right next to my house does it.
I used to have a neighbour that would come and theatrically cough next on the other side of the hedge, even when the smoke was going nowhere near them.
Someone, this is going to be a cool story, bro moment. No, if I remember it rightly, someone who lives opposite the allotments. They used to have an allotment, but they still have the key, and they haven't changed the keys for like 30 years. And someone on the plot was having a fire, and this person objected to it, so he locked them in, and the fire brigade had to be called. It was just total scenes. Cool story.
And there's always going to be somebody who does behave poorly no matter what, like the farmer one village away who set fire to 2 fiberglass trailer backs in his field one day to burn something off. And I think the smoke was visible from space.
That's taking the mick.
It is taking the mick, and I think people don't realise sort of what the effects of what they're going to do is, but I think there is something still in the being able to have a nice tidy little fire, burning away the vegetation, looking at the destruction you have wrought upon your vegetable patch.
I've realised that I only have a sort of patchwork snapshot picture of your operations. I know that you have a polytunnel. I know that you have some chickens, and that you planted garlic and oats. What precisely have you guys got?
We have 4 patches technically. So 2 at the front of the house, 1 at the back of the house, which was the original one, which is butted against a small polytunnel, and then the patch behind that is the one that's going to be become Chickenopolis. And then we have some strips at the edges of the fields, which, because we've got this rotavator that is a death trap, it has no kill switch, it has no off switch, really. You start a fairly powerful two-stroke motor and you hope it's pointing in the right direction. You engage drive by flipping the motor up on a cam, and it lifts the entire engine block up enough to tension the belt to start the blades turning.
Oh my word!
Oh, there are videos of me just trying to use it in the clay soil.
I've seen that. I've seen you almost screaming as you go past the camera. But
It is.
I didn't
Yeah.
realise that's how it engages.
Oh yeah, and the only way to stop it is either it runs out of fuel, you hit the choke on the engine itself, or you knock the cam, which knocks the engine back below the point where it tensions the pulley. But it's okay though, because it's currently on loan out to a friend, and in return we've loaned their wood chipper of death, which has 3 sides which could kill you. There's an open exposed belt from a 4-stroke engine on one side. The front side has no guard on the output feed, which is at knee height. So you could just put your arm in there into the blades from that side. A dog could wander through and just walk into it, no problem. The third side, you could easily tip yourself into it, and there's no kill switch on it, and you cannot hit the off part of the motor. The thing that interrupts the current for the spark plug. You can't hit that from any point of the operation. So when you're feeding stuff into it, there's no way to stop it within arm's reach.
We were born into that world of standard, man.
It is I do quite like the idea of just don't arse around with this, otherwise you're going to lose a limb. Principle of safety. I do work well in that world, and we'll probably explore that in future episodes. But the rotavator has been used to churn up soil that hasn't been turned or ploughed probably in 30, 40 years at the edge of the field. And that's where we put potatoes in. And then, for reasons that don't need to go into, we had a bucket of oats. So we scattered that in. The oats did really well up until they were about a week away from being ready. And then every single wild bird in the county came through and nicked them.
Beasts.
Oh, I could have walked through with a butterfly net at a low level and captured about 50 different species. The wildlife were great. They loved it. But I didn't get miss sodding oats this year. But the potatoes have done really well. We do well with potatoes here. We are basically the west coast of Ireland in terms of soil makeup, I think. And yeah, we are potato central. The problem is now we haven't got enough dry sheds to put the bloody potatoes in.
Have you lifted them yet?
About 2/3. We did find last year's potatoes in there still that we've missed. So we have overwintered them a couple of times. They've been okay. It just depends how wet that particular patch of soil is.
Yeah, they don't last long. They don't store very well.
No, but we've got shallots. We've got a lot of shallots this year. We did well with shallots. Some garlic. Okay, I've been told there's loads of garlic, so it's not just a small bag of seed. There's another bag somewhere, is there? Onions as well. So yeah, so that's what we have, and we'll probably talk about that in future episodes anyway, because I want to get some advice from you as we go into the planning phase for next year. But that's a future episode. So, Karl, where can people find your things?
I have a Substack. It's thegrower.substack.com, and I put up little reviews. Well, there's not a lot on there yet. I put up an article about my reading on the history of allotments. I put up a picture of the hops that I harvested this year, and I'm drinking them right now at the moment, actually, and they are muy delicioso.
Yeah, because we want to talk about beer. We want to talk about tobacco. There's a lot to explore in all of these things. You do a lot of other stuff, but that's a future episode. So thank you so much for joining us on this wet and stormy evening in early October. I'll speak to you soon, but we'll bring you back for the episode the future soon. That was bloody terrible. How do real broadcasters do this? How am I so terrible at this? I've been doing it for years. Right, bye.
Right.